Welcome to the Business English Podcast, the best place for non-native professionals to learn how to communicate clearly and confidently. My name is Tanya Suarez, and in each episode, you're going to learn specific skills to develop your corporate communication, American pronunciation, and career strategy in order to build the life you deserve. Let's jump right in to part 1. If you've ever been told to slow down or that you speak too fast in English, this episode is for you. In part 1, we're going to explore communication and confidence, specifically why you speak so fast and how you can improve, and what that has to do with confidence. Okay, so first of all, let's give you some superficial quick tips. So if you're a fast speaker, here are 3 things you can do to improve, because I find in my experience, telling yourself or telling other people to just slow down, it's not effective. Of course, they know they have to slow down. If they knew how, they would. So this is where I want to give you the techniques that will allow you to do that. Okay, first of all, breathe more. Everyone that I coach who is a fast speaker has this in common. They don't breathe. Typically, if you're answering a question or you're about to speak, you just speak. What this does is it actually makes you sound more nervous and less sure. And I know from a language perspective, you're probably doing it thinking if you don't pause, you're actually going to sound like your English is better. Unfortunately, the opposite is true. So take a breath. In fact, don't even inhale and exhale like I just did. I would recommend only inhale, because if you inhale and exhale, that's when it feels like too long of a pause. So just inhale and let the air get exhaled as you speak. So instead of saying, I have the answer to that, inhale, I have the answer to that. With that breath, that tiny pause actually sounds more sure of yourself. And because of that breath, your voice is going to be steadier and you're going to feel calmer, which will help you communicate more calmly. Tip number 2 is open your mouth more. Fast speakers, typically it's because you're keeping your mouth tighter, and it could be an influence of your native language. It could be just how you speak. But when you don't open your mouth, it makes it really hard. It's easier for you to speak faster, but it makes it really difficult for other people to understand you. So simply by opening your mouth more, it will allow you to make the sounds of English more clearly, which has the awesome impact of making your message more clear. And tip number 3 is stop planning what you want to say in your head. So yes, in order to speak better, you need to listen better. Be an active listener. When other people are speaking, just breathe and enjoy what they're saying. Really take it in. Because what a lot of fast speakers do, and actually what a lot of non-native, even native speakers do this, it's a great thing to train yourself out of. Be present in the moment. I know that you've probably trained yourself to plan what you want to say so that you feel more confident about the grammar and the word choice. But I'm telling you, it is worth pushing yourself to listen better, because when you're an active listener, they're giving you a lot of the vocabulary and a lot of the sentence structure that you need. And when you use those words, when you use their phrasing, it also has the added consequence, positive consequence of making people feel like you understand them. So this increases your executive presence, it increases your leadership, it increases your empathy. This is going to help you communicate and connect much better. And also, because you're calmer and you know what you want to say without planning it, you're going to be able to speak at a rhythm, at a pace that is a lot more natural instead of sounding nervous and being really fast. So those are the 3 things you can do from a physical perspective to help you speak at a more natural pace. However, the work that I do with my clients goes a lot deeper, because if you are in a higher position at work, if you are an executive or in a leadership role, there are people that look up to you in the way that you, and people that depend on you. And the way that you increase that trust has a lot to do with how you present yourself and how you communicate. So something that I do with my clients is we do a root cause analysis. It's not just about, okay, you speak quickly and let's get you to speak slower. It's really about taking the time to dive deep. And this can get very emotional. It can make you feel very vulnerable. So if you're doing this on your own, do this in a safe space. And if you're doing this with a coach or with someone else, just make sure it's someone that you trust. So let's do it together right now. Something you want to think about is, why you speak so quickly. Sometimes it's a simple answer, you're nervous. Other times it can go deeper, and if you don't address those deeper reasons, you're never going to fully feel in control of your speed, and that can really hurt your growth and your communication. So I'm going to give you a few examples of some of the discoveries that I've made with other clients, see if anything resonates with you or if it inspires you to process your own experience in a different way. Okay, so let me see. I'll pick 3 of my favorite examples for this particular exercise. With one of my clients, I loved how confident he was. C-suite executive, amazing sense of humor, super confident, but spoke so fast. And so with that speed, some of the sense of humor got lost. It's hard to laugh at something if you don't understand it. And this can also manifest in a way where speaking so quickly, while I knew he was confident, maybe in a meeting, it could be perceived as a lack of confidence or nervousness. And when you're in charge of the department that he was in charge of, you really need to show calm confidence. So when we explored, okay, the first thing you want to ask yourself is, do you think you know why? Let's just, brainstorm. Secondly, you want to ask yourself, are you a fast speaker in your native language? If the answer is yes, that opens up some new opportunities. You can ask yourself, okay, is the communication in my native language something that's also faster? Or do I also have that issue? Because sometimes people are also fast speakers in their native language. That doesn't mean it's good. They probably also get the feedback of, oh my gosh, you speak too fast. So this is something that could be an opportunity to improve communication in 2 languages. So that being said, back to this case study, we explored that yes, he was a fast speaker in German, which is his native language. And in exploring that even further, just asking yourself questions like, okay, when do you recall starting to speak fast and that didn't quite work out? Then we moved into family dynamics. And in learning more about his family, realized he was one of several siblings. Then we're starting to get to the good stuff. So I asked a few other questions, and we were able to pinpoint the root cause of this tendency is because he grew up with a lot of very loud and competitive siblings. And he was one of the younger ones. So in order to be heard, he had to speak quickly or else someone was going to talk over him. And that created that tendency to be a fast speaker in German, which then he pulled into his speaking skills in English. Once we were able to identify that, I did some breathing exercises. You really want to accept that discovery, and then you want to release it. This is where you have a choice. This is where you think, okay, this is a part of who I was. Do I want it to be a part of who I am? Do I want it to be a part of who I am in English? And in this case, this was not something that was working to his benefit in German either. So we were able to make that conscious choice of, okay, when I'm in a meeting, it's not the same as when I was 10 years old with all of my brothers and sisters and everyone talking over each other. Here we take turns, I can take my time. And so that really helped create a safe mindset in order to improve that. Another interesting case study was a client that I worked with, and this is one of those examples where it can really be interesting how deep some of these tendencies go. So something that I noticed with this client is that she over-explained a lot. So she had the English to speak, but it was a strategy. It was the communication that was really lacking. And so I started noticing that every answer she was giving, and even in casual conversation with each other, there was this tendency to over-explain, to give too many details. So we decided to push that further because being in sales and being an entrepreneur, this was really hurting her business development. As we pushed further, realizing, okay, do you do this in your native language? When do you think this started? It took a lot of digging, and it was a very emotional process because we were able to trace it back. The root of this tendency was having grown up in a tumultuous household. There was not the best parenting there, and being in a house where abuse and alcoholism was prevalent, it caused an insecurity and it caused a need to want to over-explain in order to avoid certain negative behaviors. And so this vulnerability, this little child who learned to communicate in that way to protect herself, grew up into an amazing, confident woman, but who was still holding on to that protective need to be understood by over-explaining. Oh, this was a heavy one, and it was really interesting because you want to take time when you realize these things, breathe. You want to make sure that none of this stress stays in your body. move around, and really frame it in a positive way of, okay, I got to the root. I had no idea I was doing that. And a lot of times, especially if you've done work with a therapist, you might think, oh, I thought I overcame that already. And so this can kind of trigger, especially in those of you who are perfectionists, it can kind of trigger feelings of failure or not feeling good enough. That's not why we do this work. This work is to empower you, to give you the choice. So after we did some breathing exercises, we decided she was going to choose that she didn't need that anymore. Now that she understood why she did it, it became so clear how she didn't need that in this new setting. And it was really awesome. I feel like that was a light bulb moment. And there was something about that situation in particular, that emotional reaction that allowed her to get a little bit angry almost, but in a good way, of like, no, I'm not going to be that anymore. I'm going to choose to be a stronger, more confident version of myself. Oh, that was so, it was amazing to see the growth once you realize that. And that's why it's worth digging deeper. It's not easy. It can be very painful. But if you do it in this very empathetic process and with calmness and breathing and love, it can be very, very empowering for your English communication. Okay, so my third and final example for today, this one was interesting because typically I've worked with a lot of Brazilians, and the tendency culturally for Brazilians is that they overspeak. They're a passionate culture who, regardless of the level of English, is not afraid to talk. And that's a beautiful thing. And I love the confidence of what seems to be almost everyone in that country. However, this was presented in a unique way. And something about knowing those stereotypes of Brazilian communication had blocked her from realizing that she was actually doing something different. So this particular person actually struggled with speaking up. And part of it was that illusion of perfectionism, of not wanting to make mistakes. But getting to know her, I realized, like, no, this is a very knowledgeable, amazing professional. There's no reason for that fear. So I really wanted to pinpoint, your English and your grammar is actually quite good. So that can't be the only thing that's triggering you. So through this work, and again, take this could be an example of yourself, take it to think and inspire your process. Through the work, we realize that, yes, she comes from a very loud and loving family. However, in her particular dynamic, everybody else was really loud. And as a child, and even as she got older, she tended to be the one in the family who was a little bit overwhelmed by that and tended to retreat and be the quiet one. And so realizing, and there were some other factors in there, of course, but those are a little more private, realizing that that was how she reacted to being in those situations and how she was taking that in to these corporate meetings that she was in was a revelation, because it was just one of those moments where it's like, oh, I'm not afraid of making a mistake. I'm overwhelmed. And then breathing. And this is where the choice comes in. Once you realize why you do something, the only way to improve or to grow out of it is to take a moment to make a conscious choice. We're able to sit there and think, do I want this in English? Actually, do I want this in Portuguese? Because you have a choice there also to grow in your native language. So being able to see like, okay, that's not who I want to be. I actually don't want to be quiet. I want to be confident and be able to speak up. In her position in particular, it was a lot about being vocal about solutions and pitching ideas. And so being quiet was actually hurting her professionalism because people couldn't see how talented she was and how many great ideas she brought to the table because she was too nervous to speak up. So being able to make that acknowledgement, breathe, and make a conscious choice of, okay, that's not who I want to be, was amazing. When I tell you the confidence, though, she started leading webinars, seeing career growth, is now exploring these amazing options. I am so proud. And it took a lot of vulnerability. So all three of these, and pretty much everyone I've ever coached, we go through this kind of revelatory moment, because when you get to the fluency level, when you get to being advanced, when you get to the point of your career where you're having most of your work in English, people don't realize what an emotional stage that is. When you're an English learner, beginner to intermediate, everything's predefined for you. You've got standards, you've got tests to pass, you have levels you can do. And so there's a satisfaction and a safety. Once you get into real life English and really achieving that level of fluency, It's very emotional. It's very vulnerable. It's very triggering. But it's so satisfying when you know how to work through those. So for today, if you happen to be a fast speaker, or maybe you're the opposite, maybe you're quiet, maybe you're like the third example, maybe you have some other tendencies that you know that you do, but you don't know why you do it. I hope that with this episode, you have the guide to take you through that process of self-exploration and then choose growth, choose a different path. Whatever path you choose, now you know how you can look up resources for extra help. And this is a game changer. And for part 2, we're going to use a business English expression to practice our pronunciation. All right, the expression for today is run with it. Run with it. So notice the difference when I do it individually. Run with it is separate. However, when we say it naturally, the TH at the end of with links to the I sound at the beginning of it. With it. Run with it. And this is interesting because it's actually part of a pattern that you can use to improve your natural English speech. Whenever a word ends with a consonant sound and the next word begins with a vowel sound, there's going to be that linking effect. So just like we did here, there's no pause. It's going to sound like it's kind of mushed together as one word, but there's a strategy behind it. So repeat after me, run with it. Now, before I tell you what it means, and you may have already heard it, I'm going to give you a few examples because it's more powerful for you to see if you can understand through context, and then I'll give you the official meaning after. All right, the first example is, we have a great concept for a new product. Let's run with it and see if we can turn it into a profitable venture. So notice here some other examples of linking. Turn it into. Turn it. Turn it. When you understand connected speech patterns, which is linking, what we're doing right now, it'll help you see. A lot of times the first reaction I get from people is, oh, that's why I don't understand Americans. Because you're thinking individual words, but the way we speak, it's like 2-3 words smashed into one. So when you understand this, it'll also improve your listening. And when you can understand people, that makes you feel more confident, and it'll hopefully help you feel more comfortable in speaking up. Next example. That's a great idea. Let's run with it and see how it goes. So remember, you're trying to figure out through context what run with it means. Now for this one, let's see how it. So we've got the w from W and how, and the I in it, how it goes. Now goes, that's an interesting one because I find that sometimes people are a little bit confused that sometimes the S's in English sound like an S, and sometimes they sound like a Z. So goes, that's going to be more of the vibrational Z sound. That's that's that lighter S, but we also have linking. That's a great idea. All right, next example. I trust your judgment. You should run with it and take the lead on this project. Now, something interesting here that I want you to note is a lot of times when you hear teachers or people who are even on podcasts generally, we tend to articulate, we tend to enunciate the sounds a little more than you would in natural speech. So here, for example, I said, I trust your judgment. The T's were very clear. But I'll be honest, that was intentional. I'm trying to speak clearly. And typically when you're on a mic like this and for podcast purposes, people tend to really work on their clarity more. In natural speech, Americans tend to drop the last sound in a lot of words. So I trust your. The T is either very lightly pronounced or completely eliminated, but the tongue still goes in the placement, even if there's no air coming out. So not trust, but just trust. My tongue stops in the T position, but as you can hear or not hear, there's no air. These are tiny things that you can work on either to play around and see if you can use that more natural pronunciation, or if it's challenging, or most importantly, if people have a hard time understanding you, I always recommend go for the clear version, even if it's a little more enunciated than you hear other people do, because bottom line is you want to be understood. That's the whole purpose of communication. Okay, And actually something else that you might hear in the part 1, you'll notice a lot. I think I said the word first or something else that was an ST. And sometimes you hear me enunciate the T and sometimes you hear me drop it. So these are interesting tendencies. There's no correct or incorrect. It's just the way that we speak. So choose the one that makes you feel the most confident. You'll also hear this in next, like the next day. But if I'm saying it, like if I'm just talking to a friend on the phone, the next day, the T is dropped. So observe that when you're watching movies and shows, and it's really interesting how often we do it. Okay, the second to last example. We don't have much time, so let's just run with it and make the best of the situation. So here for don't and can't, because those are very important in terms of the implication, the decision, the action that follows. I highly recommend go ahead and over-enunciate, over-articulate the T and use your body language. So shake your head left to right and the no. And then when you say I can or I do, you're going to nod your head up and down. Having body language cues is going to help the person understand you better. So even if they don't quite hear the T, the rest of you is giving them the information they need. All right, and our last example for today, if you have a strong feeling about this approach, let's run with it and see if it works. Now here for pronunciation, one of the letters that we drop a lot is the D at the end of and. You'll often notice that Americans will just say N, so run with it and see. Run with it and see if it works. So this is important because when you're training English properly, as you learned it, and this is why I say a lot of times with my clients, I'm like, listen, your English is better than a native speaker's, because non-native speakers tend to speak English more correctly, sometimes using a slightly more formal version or more complete sentences. Whereas a native speaker, we speak a lot in fragments, we're more casual with it, the pronunciation has a lot more connected speech. So these are things that knowing it and understanding it will improve your listening. If you want to play around or if you want to improve that more natural form of speech, these are things that you can study and implement and will help you sound a little less formal. All right, now that you had 5 examples with this expression, do you know what run with it means? If you said to take an idea or opportunity and make the most of it, basically to do something, then you are correct. So if you ask someone if they want you to do something and instead of saying yes, they say, run with it. That doesn't mean go running. It means yes. For more business English resources like articles, videos, courses, and one-to-one coaching with me, head over to tanyasuarez.com.